Hello, greetings and welcome. I am coming to you in a slightly different format than I usually do, and there is a purpose to this. There is, I don't know how many of you guys have felt it, but there is certainly a lot of very powerful and potent, yet I would call it like unseen or energies in the subtle realms. And today I wanted to kind of give a oracular transmission on what I'm seeing. And so while we will have some charts up, um, it doesn't matter if you can read them. It doesn't even matter if you can see them. If you wanted to like lay down and listen to this transmission, that would be fine. Just to take the energy and the message and I'm clearly feeling a lot myself. And, I wanted to share some of the very deep and powerful transits that we have going on that aren't the ones that are the most obvious. Like we have um, over the weekend, there was a politically violent event, and, many of the people really focused on the most obvious form of uh astrology, which is, of course, yesterday was the Mars Uranus conjunct Algol chart. But even more than that, for an even longer time, there has been something building in the background that isn't getting talked about very often, or if it is getting talked about, it's getting talked about more like on the mundane level, um, rather than, about how it affects us personally and like how it might affect the field in general. And so, one of the first things that I wanted to show you here, let's see. So, this is the June 4th chart, and it is the chart of the Venus conjunction in Gemini. And Venus conjunctions are really important. And the underworld conjunction, even though Venus is very far away and we can't see her, it's a very important one because Venus travels with the sun for months. And so it's not like her conjunction that begins her cycle when she's in retrograde, where the Venus stays with the sun for about 5 to 8 days. It's a time in which the sun and Venus are in this deep alchemical union, but it's like beyond the veil. They're doing work. If you imagine being in a temple, like they're behind the Holy of Holies. I don't know if you've ever sat through for me, I was an Orthodox Christian, and there are times that, during the service, the priest will take himself around the other side. There's usually like a screen filled with iconography. And when he is preparing the Eucharist, the blood and body of Christ, oftentimes they go around to the back and the priests are hidden when they are doing their work. And I often think of Venus in the underworld as doing this kind of work, like this unseen work in the world, hidden behind the veil, that is very transformative. And she's doing it on behalf of humanity, but because it's hidden, we don't always know what's going on. But of course, we have some clues. So the first clue is, and I speak about this often, that the Venus Sun conjunctions are uh, the the sun king, the solar king, or the energy of the solar masculine, which is very benevolent. It is about raising consciousness. It's protective. It is the light. It is the light that is the source, right? So and then the feminine initiatrix. So the woman the sacred prostitute. I mean, there are many names, the queen, the sacred feminine who initiates the king, right? Into every time there was a new king in the ancient world, he would be initiated by the goddess, and he couldn't be crowned king until he had gone through this initiation by the goddess. And so I tend to think of the Venus conjunctions as having this energy. It's very short and potent at the retrograde beginning phase, and it's very like long and mysterious. It's almost like now the king has been crowned, like Venus initiated the sun in Leo back in August 2023. And now they're doing this deep alchemical work at the second conjunction in the underworld, the superior conjunction when Venus is on the far side of the sun. They're doing this work on behalf of humanity. So like they're furthering their project. So she's not necessarily here initiating him, but they are together working on behalf of the evolution of humanity. And the Venus cycle in and of itself is very connected to the women's mysteries, the rose lineage, the energy of the rose lineage, which is to bring benevolent codes, new benevolent codes to humanity. Like that is literally the job. And it is through the frequency of love and truth that they do this, right? So there is a sense of lifting the veil. And so when Venus rises, this is also important. But let's just kind of stay focused here for a second. So Venus this time had her superior conjunction in the sign of Gemini. And if you've listened to some of my other videos, this may feel a little redundant, but it's very, very important here based on like what we're sensing in the background. And I'm going to tie all this stuff together. There's going to be a great weaving of wisdom here. So just kind of try and stay with me. It's why I didn't want to be on screen. I want to weave together several different astrological threads and how they are being felt and how they are reverberating through the field. So, Gemini, the mysteries of Gemini. Gemini's esoteric ruler is Venus. And Gemini really holds the codes of duality, right? And one of the major dualities that we work with on this plane of existence, like we don't realize we're working with it all the time, but is the dance of yin and yang, or the dance between the energies of the masculine and feminine. And so Gemini uh, holds the codes of twin flame energy. And let's like parse this out a little bit, because I think twin flame energy, that like that word has been so highly codified by the collective to mean something that it doesn't mean. In fact, I think it's become so distorted that it's almost in its toxic form. So let's begin at the beginning. So we work with in Sky Dancer and on My Venus Path, we work a lot with the goddess Inanna because her myth maps on so beautifully to the Venus cycle. And if you know, in Inanna's myth, Inanna goes down to the underworld to meet her, quote unquote, dark sister Ereshkigal. And we oftentimes think of this kind of dark pair or this dark twin, Gemini twins, as being a meeting of self, right? And then we see this lineage, the rose line, continue with these pairs, right? So Isis had her kind of dark sister Nephthys, and they were a really important pair. And in the beginning of the Judaic tradition, we have the Eve and Lilith pairing. Some might say Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary were another kind of emanation of this type of pairing, where we've got like the virgin harlot or the light and dark sisters. But essentially, one way of working with twin flames is understanding that like we all have a cosmic twin, or that our body's blueprint, our multidimensional blueprint that we incarnated in, it exists here, but it also exists in another time and space. And so if I had to think of a name for this transmission, I would call it stirring the cosmic body. So one way of looking at twin flame energy is to understand that the true twin of us is actually us, right? Like, and so there is this remembered somatic imprint, encoded in our cells, in our DNA, in our incarnation, in our soul, and our spirit, of this twin soul that exists outside of this dimension. All right. So just kind of hold on to that for a minute. And then what we see that's really beautiful, that's introduced more in the Egyptian and the Isis mysteries, is the beginning of this kind of sacred union twin flame energy, right? And so there is the erotic, tantric, kind of yogic connection that we all have with our own twin, with our own sacred other that is really connected to, one might think of it, call it like the oversoul, like it kind of lives in that place where we originated in, right? It is connected to all of the lifetimes we've had, and then of course all of the experiences that we've had in those lifetimes. And then there's us that's here. And so there's that twin flame or twin connection. I don't know if we'll call it a twin flame. And then introduced in the Isis mysteries, we saw Isis with her sister Nephthys. And then we also see Isis having a sacred counterpart in her connection with Osiris. And then this also continues throughout the Gnostic Christic religion in the twin flame with Mary Magdalene and Yeshua. And so there are these kind of two tracks, which really pairs nicely with Gemini, of twin energy that we are tracking. But for today, I really want to stay focused on this idea of our personal twin. And so that is that idea of like meeting the self that lives in the unconscious, or the self that, and or it's all in it, right? So like there's this holographic interconnectedness to all that I'm saying, right? The self that is connected to, our human body might be thought of as the causal body, but then we have all these other bodies that exist within us that are connected to like the etheric, like we all know that we have an aura, so the auric body, the etheric body. In Egyptian mysteries, these might be called the Ka or the Ba, right? Like they had this true remembrance and lived with it in the light of consciousness that their body existed on more than one plane of dimensionality. And I think that's really beautiful. It's something that we tend to forget here, like in the Western world where we're all just thinking about our own individuation. And so that's this chart. And what's really beautiful is that Mercury is not far off, and he's, co-present, and he's going to be co-present with us throughout our entire journey on the evening star side of the Venus mysteries. And what's really neat about Mercury, aside from the fact that he's just a phenomenal archetype, he's the archetype of the trickster, the magician, but he's also a psychopomp. And so he has the ability to travel between worlds, to bring messages back. He is the ruler of sound, right? And the reverberation, and how things travel and reverberate through the field, how messages are delivered. And And so when we're talking about this connection between the causal body and the cosmic body, Mercury is an excellent conduit, right, for that kind of awareness. And I think it's important to understand that Mercury's been also traveling quite closely with Venus throughout this time. And so as we're starting to feel the stirring of the cosmic body, part of that is because Venus is present, or sorry, Mercury is present and will be this whole time. And so he's kind of acting like this antenna or conduit to this primordial deep place. So now I want to move on just here to the next chart so you can see where I'm going with this. So, and this is the chart of Venus's heliacal rise. So not only do we take into consideration the chart of Venus's conjunction, but where she rises in the sky is very, very important. And I've been in my own deep, they've almost felt psychedelic at times, like body mystery. And I know part of where it's coming from is that I'm in my own Saturn opposition right now. And so there's things going on structurally with my body, in which that makes a lot of sense. But one of the things that I noticed during Venus's heliacal rise and in looking at her heliacal rise chart is that Venus is at 29 degrees Venus is at 29 degrees Cancer. Neptune is at 29 degrees Pisces. So they're making a trine, they're making a connection. Saturn is at 19 degrees Pisces, and the sun is at 19 degrees Cancer. And so there's this kind of double trine energy. Trine energy just means it's like it's open and flowing. So the energy is not conflicted or having a hard time communicating with each other. And 10 degrees of orb, so meaning 19 to 29 is 10 degrees of difference. It means that they're in communication with each other. Like we would call this a conjunction. It's not very tight, but if we look at like how exact these trines are, the sun to Saturn and Venus to Neptune, and both of these energies are in what we call a stationing energy, or like a stationing position. And stationing planets tend to be far more potent because they're not really on the move, like they're in a transitory phase. So they're like, we'll use layman's terms here, they're going forward to now going retrograde backwards. And so there's this like stopping of energy, so it potentizes the energy. So let's begin here in Pisces for a second. So Pisces is the liminal all, the alpha or the omega. I often say it is the waters we swam into this incarnation with and the waters we swam out of this incarnation with. It is, the connection that we have maybe beyond this galaxy. It is a very diffuse realm of pure potentiality. We might relate it to the cosmic mother that is beyond the Milky Way galaxy, right? So like it relates to the beginning, right? Those waters that were there and stirred in the very beginning. So that place that I was just talking about, that our twin soul or our twin blueprint, that twin of ours lives, is connected to this energy of Pisces. We might think of this, if we were thinking in divine feminine terms, as like the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is a representation of this dark, primordial water. Tiamat, that myth of Tiamat and Marduk. This is that, or that idea of chaos from the Greek, that dark matter or the black hole kind of energy, this It's very multidimensional in a sense, but it's also got a tinge of this idea of union with God. And so, the soul swims through this realm of Pisces, right, on its way into this incarnation. And at the moment that it hits this, the beginning of Aries, it hits Aries, the energy changes, right? And Aries is moved to Mars, and Mars is related in alchemy to the age of separating. And so we think of that as the moment of birth. The first degree of Aries is the moment of spring, it's the moment of life bursting forth, but it's also the moment that we separate, our soul separates from this um, union with the twin soul, with the union with God, right? And so you can imagine yourself, and this is the energy that I think is really getting stirred right now, and I'll explain what I mean. You can imagine yourself like floating through these cosmic waters, really, that idea of being, not a single drop in an ocean, but like a part of the ocean. And all of it feels really good. It's very euphoric. It's very Edenic. It feels like Shambhala. There's this deep love that is like ever present. We've not felt pain yet. There's just no separation in this space. It's ecstatic. It's euphoric, right? And we as little souls, travel from this place into, our mother's body. And then there is this moment of kind of like struggle where we've been, in this deep liminal comfort, this deep liminal love, this deep union with source and all that is. And even in the amniotic waters, there's this, you know, maybe there's this sense of tearing or pulling away, but it's not that great struggle yet that birth is, right? And so then the soul drops into the body and is birthed out, and there's this feeling of struggle. And then you're born, and then there is this great forgetting that comes over us, and that is in the sign of Aries, and it is ruled by the energy of Mars. And so it is said that humans have these two competing desires, that we're ruled by these two competing desires. One of those desires is union. And always think of that type of desire as being ruled by Pisces. And then the separating desires as being, coming online at that first degree of Aries, and being ruled by Mars. And the separating desires are the desire to be an individual, to have a soul experience, to have an incarnation that belongs to you, to individuate as a person, to set your mark on the world, to be courageous, like, so we can see how these desires would be competing, because we also tend to carry this deep longing to be united with God and to go home. And I spoke in one of my last transmissions about how Cancer is related to that idea of connection to place and to home and to domesticity. And that's here on the causal level. That's here on this incarnation with this body and this human life. But there's also this kind of like deeper longing that all humans have, that's represented by this energy of Pisces, um, to, go home, and not be separated from that deep love, or that our twin, our oversoul, right? And so some people might think of these as like the Eros and Thanatos drives, right? Like that desire to go home, that desire for union, almost as a death drive, right? Um, and the Eros as the drive to be here and have this human experience. I'm kind of trying to map on these terms just to bring greater understanding. It's not exactly right, but it's somewhat right. And so for the last little while, we have had, I think it was March of 20, I can't even remember the year. Sorry. We've had Saturn traveling through Pisces for quite a while. And Saturn, in one of the names in astrology for Saturn is like he's the Lord of karma. And he's related to time. He is related to the energy of the scythe, right? He rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. And in Capricorn, he rules like the marrow of the bones, structure, energy that coalesces around a central pole, right? And then in Aquarius, there's like this dispersal of energy where instead of energy coalescing around a central pole, it's almost as if Aquarius says, that isn't working anymore, this energetic structure we have set up. So you could think of it like a government or a hierarchy. And Aquarius often is the one who says it's time, Saturn, to break down this old structure, to end all of the energy coalescing around that central pole and disperse the energy and push out in new directions into new frontiers. And so some of the archetypes we have for Aquarius are like the mad scientist or the heretic, or somebody who would go against the consensus reality or the status quo, which often Capricorn is seen as ruling. I like to use the metaphor of the beehive for Capricorn, though. It doesn't always have to be so like rotten. The beehive just signifies how everyone works towards this goal of a central project. Bees also take on the energy of Aquarius because there are times that they need to leave the hive. Either it's got overpopulated, overcrowded, it's not in the right spot anymore. And so they do break off and leave, right? They have that energy of starting something new. What's really cool is that Saturn can be a planet that's either masculine or feminine. On Saturn's south pole, Saturn has a hexagram. And the structure that a beehive is made of is a hexagram, and that's one of the strongest structures on Earth. And so there's this quality of Saturn that is desiring to create something that lasts. And to the ancients, he was the last known visible planet. And so there's also this relationship to threshold places or being at the edge of the known and the unknown with Saturn. But I want to bring us back to this kind of idea of the Lord of karma and how Saturn is connected to our own sense of time and our own sense of like moving through this plane of reality. Like Capricorn is an earth sign. And so there's this connection to just like cycles here on earth and how we move through realities, of course, related to our bones, like what we know in our marrow. Like, have you ever heard that saying? It's like, I know it, it's bone deep, right? And so Saturn's related to all of that. And he's somebody that wants to find grounding. He wants to create structure. He wants to create something that lasts. And he's just been churning through this completely groundless place as the Lord of karma. He's been churning through this place that in us is connected to our remembrance of God, our oversoul, our past lives, all of our past karmas. And so, there's this sense that, like, at least I'm having this sense that, like, things from, before I could speak are coming up, before I could, before maybe even I was here, things from past lives, past karmas are being stirred up, right? With all of this Saturnine energy in Pisces. And then as these two, Neptune and Pisces or Neptune and Saturn are closing in on each other, they're getting tighter and tighter. There's also this sense of like Neptune is a very similar energetic to Pisces. And so it like deepens the kind of sense of lostness, this kind of sense of Maya or illusion. I can make things feel more elusive. And so, like, as we're having this churning of the causal body, all of the different etheric bodies, all of the different connections we have to the multidimensional world, Neptune is sort of making it hard to put our finger on what is actually coming up to be cleared. So there's just this vague sense that something is coming up to be cleared, but we don't know what, right? And so when Venus rose in the sky on the 10th, she was making a connection to Neptune, which is really a lovely connection, and Saturn to the sun. And these two planets are still very close to each other. And so what it does is it like stirs up or signifies the need in us with this connection to Gemini as well in this twin blueprint to go in and do this work. And so if it's stirred up for one of us, and it's being stirred up for all of us, and this idea of that union or separation is very strong. In 2025, we're going to have several of our planets, our outer planets, move into new signs. And so that's going to bring on this sense of like a new humanity. But before that, there's this sense of apocalypse. And then finally in 2026, Saturn and Neptune are going to meet at the very first degree of the zodiac. And Neptune's hanging out right now at the last degree of the zodiac. So that's also very significant regarding what we're feeling, because these points are being triggered by this energy, that 29-degree energy. And anywhere a planet is at 29 degrees, and then Neptune's hanging out at the last degree of the zodiac, right in the place before these two are going to meet when they change signs, it's going to be highlighting that sense of lostness. Like, I think for me, one of the best ways of describing what this energy feels like, if you've ever seen the movie Gravity. Gravity is Sandra Bullock and another actor, and they work on the International Space Station, and they're up there trying to fix something. And they are on the outside of the space station, tethered to the station, and something hits the station. And Sandra Bullock's and her, I think it's actually, what's his name? George Clooney, who's the other actor. They become untethered from the space station. And, I think this is a very common movie motif where like someone is untethered from their, you know, their spaceship or something like that. And then they're kind of out there in space, just with no ability to grab onto anything, just floating away into the unknown. And I remember watching Gravity, and I have a very strong Pisces signature in my chart. My South Node belongs here. And so I remember watching Gravity, just going, oh my God, like this is crazy. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to double check on something. I want to reshare my screen again. Like, this is nuts. I could connect. The movie did such a good job of connecting me into that sense of, like loneliness, aloneness, the untetheredness of what I feel like that kind of last degree of Pisces is. It's like just nothing makes sense. All the structures that we used to rely on feel like they're just not quite reliable anymore. There's a great sense of groundlessness, and it's not just in the outer world, it's in the inner world. It's being reflected by the wars and the violence that we have going on, the intense amount of separating energy. And then that deep, deep union, that longing to go home, but not even knowing where home is. And so there's this sense of lostness. And so you know, the Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries, it does signify like this new life, this new paradigm, this birthing of a whole new way of being. And there have been, if you look back historically, some really interesting things that have happened when the Saturn Neptune conjunction has happened in Aries. Like in 6,000 years ago was a time when we had a very early conjunction of these two planets in Aries. And it was a time when new calendars were being born. It was when the new paradigm of the Abrahamic religions were coming online. And so there was this sense, Saturn ruling time, of a new time beginning. And so as these two planets close in on each other now before 2026, there is this sense of time ending, right? Or of time changing or transforming, becoming different. And like Neptune hitting the planets of time, Saturn, can almost make it feel like there is a time warp happening. And so, for all of us who have a deeper connection to the field, who feel these like intuitive energies happening, or like behind the scenes things happening, um I think it can be really helpful to know that the astrology is not just supporting but clarifying um for you what you're sensing into, so you're not crazy. And what this really translates to for me is this need to, one, with the Venus Gemini conjunction and then her rise, really plugging into these Saturn Neptune energies in Pisces, really connecting ourselves or reconnecting or making an attempt to be Venus in relationship with our cosmic body, because it's part of our life here. It's part of this incarnation. It does exist and influence what we do here, it influences it, like I talked about it in the beginning, in that way, like where it's happening from beyond the veil, so we don't always understand it. It's not always tangible or reachable, but there is certainly influences, information that flows between the human body and our human self and this kind of greater cosmic or blueprint of us that lives in another dimension. And so I know that we've been talking about the dark and embodiment and needing to be in relationship with this incarnation and our humanity for a long time. There's also this need to connect the light of consciousness into the cosmic body. And with Saturn here, to me, this feels like an opportunity, although also for me personally, it's felt like rough. Like it's not been an easy thing to travel, especially because my Saturn happens to be opposite of where Saturn is. So there's just a lot of compression coming in, pressure, this feeling of like bearing a lot of weight on my shoulders or bearing more than I can bear. But there's this opportunity, as Saturn is the Lord of karma, to release karmas from our cosmic body, right? From the body that is connected through time and space, through our connection to things that have happened in other timelines with us that are coming up now, that are affecting us, really realizing all of the potential of this incarnation that are holding us back, right? That are causing us pain. There's this opportunity now, with especially in this evening star phase with Venus, because Venus is so related to the soma, through her rulership of Taurus, there's this opportunity to really get into relationship with this eternal part of ourselves and to clear out, as Saturn's going to continue moving through this space for a while. So we have time to continue to go in and clear out these karmas that live in the different energetic bodies that we house, right? So this is really important work to be doing right now, especially like between now and 2026, because in 2026, this is why I've said that the women of today aren't just through immaculate conception birthing solar kings. The women of today, the women of the rose line, are birthing a new timeline, a new humanity. And so I think of us as bridge birthers. So doing this deep work within ourselves is going to have us be ready when this 2026 conjunction happens at the beginning of Aries, to have really cleared the channels through that energy. And one of the things I wanted to say was that if you can see on this chart, hang on, let me get into this chart here. So before that 2026, I just chose a random date. You can see that we've got like Saturn and Pisces. This one just happens to have the sun here as well. But we also, the nodes have moved into this axis. And for me, this will be a nodal opposition. But the North Node speaks to us about where we're going. So we're going to have this Saturn, Neptune energy with the North Node talking to us about where we're going. And this is deep ending energy. This is like Pisces is the end of the zodiac right here. And so things are not necessarily between now and 2026 when this conjunction finally happens here at the separating first degree, that representative of the new life of Aries. It's not necessarily going to get easier. There's going to be more disillusion, more endings, more feelings of compression, of time warp, of illusion, distortion, things like that. So it's really important that we are keeping not just our body channel, our human channel clear, but that like deeper connection that we have to the eternal, like clearing the fog off of those things as well. It's deeply, deeply important. And for anybody who has placements at the end of Pisces, you're really going to be feeling this work. The great thing is that people who have placements at the end of Pisces will be feeling it. And if they're in a leadership position or they're able to really channel or clarify, they can be leaders for us through this energy, because this energy is all being triggered right now. So I think I've been talking for quite a while. I've said most of what I wanted to say. I did make a few notes and I didn't read any of them because I was in full-blown transmission mode. But let me just double check that I didn't miss something important. One of the other things that in 594 BC, when Neptune and Saturn met at 2 degrees Aries, which would be really close to that, was when currency came back online. And I actually think this is sort of an interesting fact. So prior to us having currency, coinage, the ability to buy things with a representation of value versus value, up until then, it was really the goddess who ruled commercialism, exchange, commodities, anything that had to do with abundance, because it was all derived from the land. All of our value was derived through, how much agriculture, how many animals we owned, gemstones, things that we could mine from the land. And so when currency came online, we also see this kind of switch from the goddess centered world and the reverence for the goddess into this more subjective masculine consciousness. It's not the only thing that signifies this change, but we can also see it as tangible reality moving into something more subjective, Neptune. or more idealistic. It also gave us a great amount of freedom because we didn't have to like lug cows with us everywhere we went if we wanted to buy something. So what's interesting is that at this day and age, we have again a rise of a new currency coming online. So it'll be interesting to happen to see what's happening with currency in 2026. But we also have this reemergence of feminine centered religion and spaces. And so it's almost like there's like a reclamation of timelines here that I really love. And I love the symbolicness of these two things. And so it's something I want to leave you guys to chew on, like how the feminine can come back into commercialism and, you know, what her leadership role is here in an age where currency is again shifting. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I want to say that in Sky Dancer this round, we will be working with this connection to the cosmic body. We'll be working with all of the themes I talked about. Why? Because they're in the charts. They're important. Of course, there is a lot of what I would call, it's interesting, as I've been moving through this period myself, with my own body, I have noticed that I'm using a lot of earth metaphors. So, like, I had noticed that before I made the deeper connection to the etheric, energetic part of what I'm physically moving through, I was calling it like, I need to clear the top soil so that I could get down into the sedimentary layers. I'm using a lot of uh, earth-based metaphors for my body. And it's like that with the astrology too. Like we have this really big Mars, Uranus, Algol conjunction happening. And that to me feels sort of like topsoil. Like all of that is producing events that sort of distract us from, and not that they're not important and can't, and they can change the trajectory of things, but it feels like it's more on a superficial layer than it is on like the deeper curriculum that we're really needing to be focused on. And so just also paying attention to that, like inside your experience, inside your life, like what is sort of just topsoil. Topsoil stuff does need to be cleaned and processed, like cleared and processed. So it's not to say that those distractionary or distorted energies can just be swept to the side. They still, our frustrations, the things that bother us, the things that happen on the big screen for us out in the collective, they still reverberate through, and they need to be alchemized as well. But what they can do is keep us distracted from these deeper sedimentary layers. And with what's happening with Pluto moving back into, again, the 29th degree of Capricorn for the last time here shortly, and that point also being triggered by Venus's rise and by the upcoming full moon, there's this need to keep our eye on the deep, on the deeper sedimentary layers and what's moving in the underneath, what's happening in that holy of holy places. And you can take this metaphor and bring it out into like what's going on in the collective that is just theater, that is just there to distract us, and like really keeping our eye on the wizard who's beyond the curtain, right? So to speak. So that's another important thing. And as oracles, channels, priestesses, priests, teachers, leaders, we can do both, and we all kind of do the thing that we specialize in. And so I'm just, leaving it in massive trust that everybody is going to um, tune into the curriculum and do the work that they are here to do. All right, loving you all.